Your
That thing is a godsend. It's a godsend. Oh my God.
rather that's nicer way of building one. I like that.
Yeah, I need to put another layer down in there. Yep.
I bet Tim thinks it's at 6 also.
I'm just amazed that I actually got something right for a change. I'm in the right place at the right time, because I've been flying by the seat of my pants all week.
I'll text him.
Last night, I had David Eric go, do we have a shoreline subcommittee meeting tonight? I said, no, it's next week, third week of the month. And I went,
So Jim
shit, we
Jim
do.
Richards and Tim Bourne are both here.
Oh, she's on.
I apologize,
Yeah.
people. I could have sworn it said 6 o'clock.
It did, Mondays.
That's Monday.
Mhm.
See, I read the wrong one.
To me, it's in a half hour hard. I've always struggled with them. I don't know.
So Jim, I see that you're there, but I don't see you on the screen.
Yeah, I don't know why you don't see me on the screen. I'm having to use my phone because I'm having laptop issues. But
Well, we can hear you and you can hear us.
yeah, and I think the letter J is far better looking than I am. So
Okay. Well, welcome to the meeting.
thank you.
You too, Tim.
Okay, thanks. You open it up, Joe?
nope.
Waiting for you. I was having technical issues, so it was good that you were late anyway.
Oh, good.
And they allowed me to,
Perfect timing.
yes.
Changed that tire awfully fast. Must be because it's only 4 lug nuts.
All right. All this special meeting of the select board, October 17th at 5:34 PM. All the meeting in order. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? Is there any public comment? None? General updates, capital improvement committee will review progress. Introducing the capital program plan and budget. Notes for select board on CIP enactments 2024. Any notes, anybody?
Yes, we've got some updates. for you. Thanks for joining us and taking the time. I don't, you have enough meetings already, but this being our first time out of the gate, et cetera, it's time to get together, bring you up to speed where we are and get some decisions on a couple of things. So with that, I want to provide a quick update of what we've been doing as a committee. First off, the committee has been formed and meets monthly. We formed shortly after last March meeting. We instituted the CIP committee rules of procedure. They're posted on our website and our SharePoint site. We conducted the CIP town kickoff April 10th. Some of you were present for that. That we had a kickoff with the town. As I mentioned, the SharePoint site has been established and populated with all of our working documents. The CIP website has been established. We've established an asset and inventory, a fleet inventory, which is an appendix A to the program. We've established a facilities inventory, which is the appendix B of the program. We've established the equipment repairs and maintenance schedule, the appendix C of the program. We've collected and consolidated all of the project, capital project submissions from the departments and boards, and those are appendix Ds. You won't have all the copies here because they're consolidated, and you'll see the consolidated list. We have created a draft 5-year capital improvement plan, which is appendix of the program. We've created a draft annual capital improvement budget, appendix F of the program. We've established a CIP timeline, which is our appendix G, and a frequently asked questions appendix, which is appendix H, will need to be updated after we finish this evening's discussion based on some decisions, et cetera. We have created a ranking criteria model that will be used in discussion of the projects. We are currently on target with a post CIP timeline and following the 11 steps of completing a CIP, which is a capital improvement program. And then lastly, as we brief the select board on the statute requirements for implementation of the CIP, which was your last meeting on October 2nd, respectively. That brings us to date. So the next piece is talking about some definitions that will keep us all in sync you know, what's a program, what's a plan, what's et cetera. So the CIP or the Capital Improvement Program, that's the overarching. And it coordinates community planning, financial capacity and physical development. That's the overarching. So what does our CIP of the town of North Hero, what does it consist of? It consists of 3 parts. And this keeps us all in sync as to, again, semantics and are you talking about a plan or a program or what are you talking about? The first of those is the program, which provides guidance, procedures and policy. And you had that, would you mind just holding it up as a visual aid? This document needs to be updated based on this evening. But this is the overarching program. Again, provide policy and guidance, okay?
Mhm.
The second of those is the plan, which is the capital planning and fiscal management tool. And for our sake, we're doing 5 years. So that is also appendix E, and we'll talk about it E. This is a kind of an abbreviated form, if you will, of our 5-year plan. But this is appendix E. So this is the plan. When we talk plan, okay? And lastly is the capital budget, the upcoming year's spending plan for capital items that are presented to the in our next year's fiscal vote by the town. And so this is appendix F.
Would you hand me those, Barry? I'm gonna s-
Yep.
hold them up for the people.
Yep,
on
sorry.
Zoom.
Oh, yes, sorry.
The plans.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Can you
So-
guys see this? This is the, what the plan,
Program.
program. This is the program. We've all seen this before. It's a multi-page document. This
Okay, so
is,
you changed the wording.
this
Yes,
is the plan.
and that will be absolutely throughout.
That's
You'll
part
see
of your
corrections
package.
For
if
those,
you wanna look for it.
Claire.
Mhm.
So we all are in sync as the program,
And this is the
plan.
annual
and
budget.
budget.
Again, that's part of your packet as well.
So items to review with the select board specifically for this evening. We'd seek a decision from you on the tracking and presenting of the capital improvement program, which consists of our 3 parts. Review the policies and procedures for enacting with the select board. This last bullet we wanted removed, that third one.
Hmm.
Disregard the third bullet that says does select board want, that was a scratch, so we'll remove. And then lastly is voter approval for the contingency reserve fund cycle article. And we'll talk about each of those and explain what that means. With regard to the tracking and how things would generally be presented at the annual meeting. And it is the recommendation of the CIP committee to approve the capital budget be incorporated, which is appendix F, the 1-pager. Into the operating budget as it will be much easier and less confusing to the voters as well as our departments, boards, commissions, and perhaps even the select board as currently. Now, it could be revisited down the road if we decide to, or if you decide to separate the 2 of them. But right now, their CIP's recommendation for ease and kind of this is our first time out of the gate, et cetera, is to show or to incorporate the capital improvement items in the operating budget. Now, there will be a correlation. So let's say, and I'm gonna use a hypothetical here. Hypothetical is, we're gonna put a capital improvement for this coming fiscal year in the budget is a roof for the library, just using it as a hypothetical, $20,000. Anything that exceeds the threshold, which I remind you is $10,000. So over here, and then we'll put a caveat in the annual report that says, see the annual capital budget. So there's a correlation. So when you turn down the page or page, whatever it is, page 63, you'll see the roof for they can see a consolidated list of the capital improvements. So there's that correlation. What are our capital improvements for this year? They're in there. So it's a correlation, and we're hoping that's going to be the least new, if you will, and the clearest explanation for voters and everyone else. Say, here's the capital, and see the consolidated list for the capital projects.
And that's in the budget. Oh,
It would be in the operating budget.
yeah.
Yeah, so it'll be a line,
It'll be the
it'll say
line item.
capital, whatever it is.
So as we receive the budgets from all the different departments, they will already have that in there?
No, it'll come from it'll probably come through, I'm guessing, working with Lisa, I'm guessing, I'm not trying to, but to show, because you coordinate, you
We've
bring
submitted
that together,
budgets
right?
already, some of us have.
Yeah, so if they're not in there when they come in from the departments, boards and commissions, Lisa will make that edit to say, okay, there is a line in there for, again, using the hypothetical, the
20,000.
roof or the library would be in there, capital improvement, roof, library roof, $20,000.
And that's the question. When does that get populated? Does it get populated after the vote? I'm just
Well,
asking.
they need it in advance to review the budget, so that'll
Oh,
be
yeah.
coming up very soon, that'll be coming up very soon.
And then, of course, that gets
So
presented
then I
to the
can-
voter, so that's,
So we have to go back to each board and make sure that they know what it's gonna be in their budget. I'm just thinking out loud. That out of.
no, it's good.
So our gatekeeper,
Timing.
kind of to answer your question, our gatekeeper really, I forget whether you asked that or Carl did, our gatekeeper for that is actually Lisa, because she knows what the committee has done, and she's bouncing it off of what the department or board of commission submitted, and ensuring that that capital line is in there.
So if the voters don't agree with one line, using your example of the roof, it could shoot down the whole budget.
Correct. And I will tell you that we have pondered,
No lie.
we,
Unless it else.
yeah, we've gone back and forth of, and it goes to the point of, do you incorporate them or do you not incorporate them? It's always, it's a catch 22 regardless of which direction
But
which
we
door you
also-
come through.
It also include, for example, if that $20,000 for the library, as an example, was funded through a grant, let's say, that would be explicitly stated, in there, so there would
Right.
be any confusion about it. If it's new money from the taxpayers, or whatever the funding source is.
Right, that's part of that.
That would be part of the budget reporting process.
Budget revenue and budget expense, or granted revenue and grant expense, we could do it that way.
Never time. So we buy.
And then on the appendix F, which is kind of a roll up, one of the last column here is the recommended source of income or financing, or not income, financing, like. In this case, it may be 100% reserves, it may be whatever, therefore it's telling the taxpayer, this is not incurring any additional levy. It may be 100% grants, it could be.
So here's my question. My question is on so the way that it's been done here, the way that we've been doing it, we have particular, line items, like fire department,
Mhm.
$30,000.
Each dollar.
Okay, so does that 30,000 there then go into so that there are no longer any line items?
Are you just so I understand your question, Carl, you're referring to separate articles?
Yes, the articles, yes.
Sorry, if there's a need, correct me if I'm wrong, if there's a need to ask the voters for levy in the form of some form of tax, I think the answer is yes. Is that not accurate? Otherwise, if it's being funded by grants and
Well, I'm not,
Reserves and other
it's
things.
just that we asked the voters, will they provide the fire department with $30,000?
Right.
Yes or no?
Right.
That was specifically put in there because there was some worry if the budget went down, they weren't going to get their 30,000.
Mhm.
So they wanted to stand alone. Much like rescue wanted to stand alone.
Right.
All right, so that they would put that because they did not want to get wrapped up into a budget fight. And then the budget goes down and then they don't receive any monies.
Was that 30,000, like their entire budget?
No.
It was just.
So that was
Town appropriate.
it was town appropriated there because of their new truck,
Okay,
okay? And basically that was the payment on that particular one.
but if the town budget, in that case, let's say the 30,000 was approved by the voters, but the town budget fails for whatever reason. Then you have to come back with a new town budget until it gets passed eventually.
Right, but in the meantime, their voters will have voted on
The
the
30,000.
30,000 and it's just like, okay, so,
That's a given. Now we have to come back and do the whole town budget.
right. So, I mean, that's why these articles were put in their specific lines. You know,
I would have to say that,
An
again,
appropriation isn't capital, so those are different. So the appropriation we're giving to the fire department and rescue.
The definition of an appropriation by statute is money that you give to a social agency that we don't have any control over.
okay, so we don't have any control. That's fine.
How they spend it,
Right.
Thank you.
Right,
how they spend it. The town, the voters authorize the town to give the fire department $30,000.
Yeah,
They can have the $30,000 and they can spend it however they want.
They
right.
don't have to report to us what they do with
Right,
it or.
well, another-
A capital improvement is if they come to, the fire department comes to the town and says, we want the town to buy us a new fire truck
Okay,
using
That-
town
okay, all right.
money.
That's,
That would be the difference.
okay, so I'm clear on that part.
it wouldn't be part of the articles. You know, you have the appropriations and then you vote on a bunch of stuff.
That
at the top.
doesn't change.
Right, that wouldn't show up.
The capital, in Lisa's example, the capital request would be part of their operating budget, which is part of the overall town budget.
That's only if they're asking
For something specific.
for something,
For the town to buy them a fire truck, that would be a capital,
then that would
Purchase
be
on the
included
town.
in the capital plan
yes.
or budget.
Like the fire
that's gonna-
station, they've asked the town to build them a fire.
So that's in
station.
here.
So it's gonna be an,
That's
it's gonna be an
our first year
evolution, though,
plan.
because I'm just trying, I just only have one, I only have one experience, that's the library. In our budget for this year, 24-25, we have $5,000 in the capital, the capital improvement, whatever the line item was called in our budget. And there's 5,000 in there, and that was for minor can't even call capital, minor repairs under
Projects.
10,000
Major
projects. And so if we lump this stuff, I'm just a little bit worried about the confusion of putting then adding another $20,000 for the roofs. Now we have $24,370, and then the voter is gonna say,
More.
click on something to go find out what that really is.
But are you going to use the $24,000 for the roof from your reserves?
It doesn't matter, I don't wanna confuse that, because that's not my call right now. When I'm confused, but I wanna make sure that I'm pretty. I'm not used to having capital in the operating budget, so that's my dilemma. But if you have. Are they voting down my budget because they don't want me to spend the $5,000 for these minor improvements or the $20,000 for the roof, or don't they just like the overall amount that's being asked by the library?
Yeah, you don't know.
And so if you go back and have to work through that with your constituents, how do you? I mean, you have to just go through that's what I'm struggling with.
Well, and I think that that's where it's very
Sorry.
important there, that there are representatives
Yeah.
of each and every group
Do some more.
at the informational meeting, so that they can speak to
There might be.
all that. You know, because these questions may come up and I may look like a deer in the headlights.
We should do that
Okay.
for you.
And there's a lot of words here. I'm a simple kind of person there. There's a lot of words that get thrown around, so you have to give me some time to process all this up in this little thing. So, so that I don't make a mistake, you know, an article versus a line item versus a this, that, whatever, and, you know, so, but no, so go on there, Terry.
Well, one thing we're hoping to do with this whole process is provide accurate information and transparency. So if, for example, there's a new money request for whatever, for discussion, that would be explicitly stated in the documents that this is new money to the library. Meaning, they don't have any reserve, they don't have any grants, that their request would be $20,000 from the town for the new roof on. It would be very explicit about that that's new money, and there's no other funding source for it. Now, if somebody chooses to vote the whole budget down because of that, that's their choice.
But there'll be many, each department will have it.
Correct.
And, you know, some might say, I don't like that one.
And
So
also go ahead.
is there a way, reading through some of this stuff, it looks like a lot of it is funded through the fund or the reserve. So why can't you just say, like the library, 20,000 will be coming out of their fund balance?
If in fact that
That's
is the
where it is,
case,
yeah.
Right.
that will be stated there.
And that's in appendix F, so when you look at this, so this is the real appendix F, library. Basement ceiling. It's 100% of the reserves, so.
So that wouldn't show up on the budget.
It would not be aligned, but.
Right, but
Right.
they'll see it in the capital plan because there's a project ongoing, but it's been paid or will be funded out of 100% of the reserves.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I'm struggling with what comes out of, or what goes into the budget versus what goes.
In that case, nothing would go into the budget.
Right, exactly.
He was right, only those funds that we're asking the town to pay for that we don't have another way to pay for.
And we would tell the town, our constituents about what we're doing to make any improvements in another. They wouldn't know anything was happening.
They wouldn't know, they would
How
know.
would they know?
Well, we're gonna tell them with this. Okay,
We have a plan.
we have a plan.
We have a plan.
So all these, you know, I mean, say, cemetery commission, library, all these other departments here, whatever. So the monies that they have accumulated either over the years here by trying to plan for projects and whatever, that stays with them. That does not go into the budget.
Right.
Well,
That's the.
unless they're gonna
Not-
spend it,
Well,
only if they're gonna spend it,
if they're gonna spend
then
it,
it will show up on that appendix F,
right.
coming out of their reserves.
Out of their reserves. So
Right.
their reserves, everybody's department there has a reserve column.
If they have one now, they
If they
keep
have,
it. Yep,
yes.
they keep
Okay.
it. That doesn't change.
All right.
But that is where some of this will be coming from,
Some,
of
right,
the improvements.
some of the improvements, yes,
And,
will be coming from the reserves.
and it will truly be more of a capital improvement rather than a repair and maintenance,
Yes.
which normally would go into the
Into the
budget.
operating budget.
Right, so
Yes.
it's kind of confusing that way, because you're taking capital items and putting it in an operating budget.
We really debated back and forth, one. Cause I'll be honest, I was an advocate for separating the two, especially starting this, because I'm a simple guy and I capital operating. But the more I watch and learn about the way the funds are. Either via statute or whatever, or requirements here, or. You know, which department has a reserve, an official reserve, which departments don't, you know. Who gets an appropriation, who doesn't? It gets very confusing. And so the fewer edits to the existing budget that people are used to looking at and you're used to looking at, we thought may be the best way to go right now. It is definitely a catch-22. Regardless, if you separated the two of them, meaning capital and operating, the capital could pass and the operating could be shot down by the voters, or vice versa, right? There's always that risk.
Mhm.
I will make an overarching comment because I've seen we've all seen the numbers from Lisa. Fortunately, with all of the reserves that exist and the projects, we're probably in project heavy right now for the town of North Carolina. It kind of all came down like the perfect storm. But at the end state, we're only, as a town, we're only like $90,000 short of achieving everything that's on, within the plan right now. As we stretch out here. So I mean, that's pretty darn good news based on the reserves that exist right now. And grants and other funding sources.
And projects that are already in existence.
Right, so
We've included them.
Right, I understand that, but that's one of those things that's already been decided. We won't have to go through that again, right?
You don't have to go.
Such as, the North Station building.
Mhm. Shouldn't have to re-vote on that.
I'm sorry, what?
Shouldn't have to re-vote on that.
Right,
Anything that's already been voted on shouldn't have to be a revote.
right.
we have projections in the 5-year plan, if there was a need for capital to support that. Cause you have, that's purpose of the plan, right? To project that. But the approval to proceed with it has already taken place.
So we come up with all this. maintenance stuff. Let's use the North Station building replacement. Let's say they don't get their request in here at that particular time, that it is not feasible to have a special vote. So this vote comes after the March meeting, okay? How does that money show up then? Let's say there that we go for a bond for a new fire station. Go for a bond there, let's say it's in June. The voters agree to it. Let's say we'll just put a number on it, $3 million. So then we play catch up then, as far as with the capital plan,
The capital plan
because it won't necessarily.
is a
you know,
plan and
it's-
plans change.
Right,
So it'll always be changing.
It's a
as
revolving,
It's a,
right.
it'll
Okay.
always need to be updated. It'll all, as we get bids in, as
Yeah.
we start to get bids for the water projects, and we start to get actual quotes for the fire station and public works garage, all of these documents are gonna have to be updated.
But would change it with the number.
The change, right,
The dollars that the
Right.
select board allocates.
yes.
Well, in
Yeah.
the current budget, you know, it has the fire station and here it says 100% debt.
100% debt is what we're planning.
And it is, so there's no timeline, there's no,
okay,
So it doesn't go into the operating expenses, the budget.
The operating expenses to run the fire station will be included in the budget, because we're gonna plan on it being,
Yeah, that makes sense.
going under construction in the spring was what
Mhm.
the plan was.
right,
So we should plan on there being a building there in our operating budget. But as far as the capital, we're planning on 100% debt, so there will be nothing
okay.
in the budget that is presented to the voters in March.
And then public works building is a little different.
Public Works is a little different, but that's
Yeah,
gonna come out of the
100%.
reserve fund for. So again, unless you're gonna put more money, ask the voters for more money to put into that fund to build the Public Works garage, that would go in the budget.
Okay,
But if we're just gonna
Just
use
drop.
what we have as from surplus and reserves, we're not asking the taxpayers for any more money,
Mhm.
then it won't show in the operating budget.
But it will, but the capital plan and the 5-year capital budget will show somewhere in this whole process, but that's the whole purpose of this, to be transparent.
That we're building a new Public Works garage, and it's there, and it shows fire station is 100% debt. The Public Works garage, we're showing 100% reserves.
right, so and then you have estimated total costs in that. That I think definitely changed.
Yes. Those were the numbers we had,
Okay,
so, and as we get true numbers, we have to true that up.
Yeah.
And revisit it,
okay,
but it'll always be changing, which is what makes it a plan.
Right. And I understand that part because it's not hitting the budget.
Right.
But what is hitting, like, what is it gonna be? And if, let's say, let's take
Pick
the
on
library, pick on the library. I read through, what they want. And one of them was the mold remediation and the ceiling of the basement, and then there was a comment of the foundation is iffy. So what do you do with that?
well, that's up to the select board. I mean, what this group has done is put together planning documents. And we've all been surprised at how little we have to do with the operating budget, full stop. You know, I think originally we kind of envisioned creating a capital reserve fund. And people would have to submit projects, they'd be approved, and all the monies for those projects would come from the fund. But we realized through this process that we're already doing capital planning in North Hero, and there are line items in our budget that already are reserving funds for capital planning. And so all we had to do was compile all the projects.
Because right now, we're putting $19,000 from the operating budget into the community hall reserve fund for capital. we're putting $35,000 from the highway budget into the capital equipment reserve fund for capital, for public works. So those items are in the budget already. What was the other one? There's another one.
There's, well, I mean, there's the record restorations that set aside, there's
The reappraisal fund,
The
the
reappraisal.
$15,000 we're putting set aside for that.
the North
So
Station
those
building
are the things that
replacement
are,
fund.
yeah, the North Station,
yeah.
the $10,000 for the North Station.
And the water
those-
has been doing.
and the water's been
capital
doing.
planning.
Yes.
So basically, we compiled it all, and now we're gonna present it to you and say, look, this is, you can now see all the major projects on one page. This is a 5-year projection. Use this when working through your operating budget to see if you want to make any tweaks. And maybe one of them is, hey, we need to talk to the library about this building. We don't want them doing a $25,000 basement seal if there's a structural thing. And you can start the dialogue. You didn't have that ability before. There was no connection. Or you can look at this and say, oh, that shortfall that Terry mentioned earlier, we've got almost, what is it? $6.7 million in projects listed here with only a $95,000 deficit. But now you can look at that and go, what is that deficit? Where is it? Should we put it in this year's operating budget or next? Should we break it out over the next 5 years? You now have a planning tool that you didn't before. So our outcome is a lot different than our original vision. I still think it will be helpful. And ultimately, this is something that the taxpayers can see. You know, every year they stand up and say, why do you have so much surplus? You can say, look at the $6 million projects we can do. And then you can use that to point to where some of it's reserves, some of it's debt, some of it's grants. It's not all money we're raising through taxes.
But this will also not only show projects, it'll show, which is comes from that appendix C, which are major equipment repairs and or replacement. The town truck needs to get replaced every 7th year, let's hypothetically, or the plow needs to be replaced every 5th year, or what, you know, whatever that number is. It's in here, you know, when we continue to go through the routine year to year, you know when that plow is coming up, you know when that truck is coming up, and those large ticket items.
And there may be some requests, like for something that's planned 10 years out. As opposed to paying $100,000 in year 10, let's give 10, you know, we're gonna request $10,000 a year in advance to have that, so that when the time comes, it's paid for. And it's less of an impact of a hit.
I kind of got chastised for that. They were telling me, so.
Different ways to do it.
So.
And what if changed their mind?
Who's they?
Well, let's take Public Works.
Yeah.
And you're putting money aside for new plow. And it ends up that, well, no, we don't really need the new plow, but you got the money.
Well, I think the select board probably has the authority to take that money back. I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's up to the select board. And again, that's why it's called a plan. What did the auditor tell you, Lisa?
Or we may come in and say we need X, Y, and Z, and we change it on the plan and keep
Right.
the funds allocated.
And that actually kind of opens up into our next subject, because I think we can cover it pretty fast, is that last March, you approved the contingency reserve fund and the capital reserve fund policies. However, the policies exist and there's no money authorization from voters to do them, right?
To create the fund that the policy would oversee.
Right. However, so for this year, or right now, one, we don't recommend creating any new funds or abolishing any funds. So there would be no change to the funds themselves, other than, if we, and we'll talk about this, is the contingency reserve fund, which you approved the policy, but now we need to ask the voters for contingency funds. Now, in the policy that you signed last year, it currently says 10% of the operating budget. In some research here from VLCT, from all these things, and some other towns, I think VLCT recommended,
They recommended, I got word today back from them, 2 months, which is 16.7% of the budget.
so 16%.
17%, anywhere. between
And fellow towns that you researched
Some
were,
were 20, some were 15.
so
It depended, she said it depended on, you know, your town and your needs and
Right.
your flow of money, cash flow and that kind of thing. So, you know,
Your risk level.
your risk level, right?
So right now, the town, we have surplus. That's, I would say, would be, you would grab if you needed to for a contingency. It was an emergency, right? But our best bet is to set up the contingency fund. Therefore, it is approved by the voters. It is set aside. It's that rainy day thing because an emergency happened and you didn't have to dip into other projects that may have been assigned to a capital project, as an example. So what we're recommending is to fund the contingency fund. And then this would require an article to go out to the voters to fund the contingency, but it would be funded with 100% of our existing reserves or slash surplus. I don't know if that's the right word, but there's money there. We're just gonna move it in the right pot. Have the authority. Therefore, now it is in the contingency fund and we've got that rainy day fund established.
Well, which we have at this point in time.
We don't, you have the policy, but I don't think you have the fund. It's,
So we have funds,
you have
Well,
funds,
You have
correct,
surplus
correct.
funds.
we have the funds, what I'm saying, you know. The select board, you can all correct me if I'm wrong there, but we had decided there, like, when the monies became available from Public Works. That those were not just specific to highway, right? We had built up surplus. All right, so. We have that surplus. Now, we also have on the town end of it there, as far as the other contingency fund, correct?
We do
Or-
not technically have a contingency fund.
But you've been following the 10% rule approximately.
Yes. Do you want to take this, Lisa?
As the fund balance.
As
As the fund balance, right? It's surplus.
Right,
It's
okay,
surplus.
so,
And we've made sure we've had enough in
right, so,
surplus
so
to
what you're
cover.
saying here is
emergency.
that basically that surplus then goes into a bona fide contingency
Contingency
fund.
reserve.
Contingency reserve fund. correct.
Yep.
Okay, all right,
And honestly, it does away with I hate to say it, but the ugly word of surplus. I mean, you've got,
oh, I know it's an ugly
you've
word.
got a bona fide. Totally, can be totally audited. It's in sync with VLCT. The
Policy that oversees it. So rather than showing up at town meeting and people going, why do you have $3 million? And well, this much is surplus and this much is we're saving for public works but it's all really in one lump sum. You have to kind of know to break it out. Now we'll have a way to break it out. We'll have the plan to show the projects and we'll have the contingency fund to show what is at the select board's discretion for an
Unexpected cost.
yes.
Expense.
Okay.
And
So-
Lisa has also learned something about the surplus fund.
Well, statutorily, it's supposed to go back to the voters.
Mhm.
But if the voters,
Unless you're gonna move the, right, you have a contingency fund, so then you'll have to decide what to do with the quote actual surplus after. The contingency funds will stay there, we'll adjust them, put money in to keep that 10, 15, 16, 20% into the contingency reserve fund to cover, you know, as the budgets change every year, that money's gonna change, that amount's gonna change, that has to be in there. And then you'll have to decide what to do with the true surplus.
but at least I would say coupled with that, by the town seeing the 5-year plan and the 1-year budget respectively, and they're voting on it. So the budget passes. They've approved the plan. Now, that doesn't mean you're gonna spend everything that's in that 5-year plan, but they've approved the plan and they've approved the 1-year annual budget that goes with it. It's incorporated into the operating budget. That is the voters have seen it and they've approved that as well. So it gives you more, in my opinion, it gives you the go ahead to maintain those funds, not just a contingency, because that's a separate thing, right? But even there, you've got reserve funds that you're setting aside for project X, Y, and Z.
Just a clarifying question. it just occurred to me this discussion, are there two issues related to the contingency reserve fund? One, taking the existing surplus and moving it into the contingency reserve fund. Is that a select board decision solely?
The voters will approve that. The voters will approve like we did last year with the fire station fund and the library capital fund. Do the voters approve the creation of a contingency reserve fund of which so much money from surplus will be transferred to that fund?
Fire department, public works and
Library,
But the fund is already created,
The
not
policy.
until the vote, the policy's
the
created,
policy, okay.
the fund gets created by the
So
voters.
is there two things though? Then the one is that, what we just discussed, and then the second thing is whatever the percentage is. Is that a separate item?
It's written in the
vote?
policy.
In the policy that the select board decides. The select board decides on the policy. The voters don't.
so the select board decides 15%. Then it'll be 15%.
Okay.
It'll be in the policy and that's what will guide
That's where I
us
was confused.
15% of the
I thought
operating
voters had
budget.
to approve the percentage.
No,
Okay, that's.
the select board decides policy.
And in this case, the policy is already there. But they just need to update the percentage. Okay,
You
So-
just brought something up with the library, again, the library, where there is the library capital fund.
Yes.
And we have been putting it in as an appropriation or an article where the voters say, yes, they will move $30,000 to the library capital fund.
That's what they approved last year.
Right, as a separate
80,000.
line item, not part of the operating
Right,
budget.
it's in the fund now.
So, why can't that just stay that way?
What can't? I'm lost.
Where the taxpayers, and you can have it in a capital plan, where the taxpayers see what it's going to be for, and they are voting for, let's say, the 30,000, of which will cover the repairs and the roof and the this and the that, without putting it in as the operating budget.
So you're saying, what I'm hearing is there are two ways to fund. So voters have to approve funding a reserve fund.
Yeah.
That's
The
where the voters have
creation and
control. The
funding.
creation and the funding of reserve funds rests with the voters. How North Hero has traditionally funded their reserves is through the operating budget. So voters approve the operating budget. And the operating budget has line items in it that are for capital reserves. And so those transfers happen,
And the voters are approving that.
the voters approving it.
So either way, the voters are approving it.
So, but
Yeah,
you're,
but you don't want the whole budget to go down because of maybe one item.
well, for this first year's capital budget, suggests 0 changes to our current operating budget. North Hero is already doing its capital reserve planning. So there are no changes.
There are no additions to the line items,
Correct.
no big hit anywhere.
Community hall's
So-
still gonna send 19,000 to the community hall reserve. 10,000 for North Station.
So when the question gets asked from the public. And why change it? What's the answer?
Right now, we don't have the ability to collectively look at what is our plan and one, two, does it sync with the town plan? Because we have, as you were informed last time, we have a statutory requirement to review this with the planning commission. And to see in that budget year, when we do have to ask the town voters in a budget year for money, it's right there. They see these are the capital projects for next year. We don't, yeah, it's transparency and we don't have that right now. We don't have
You
that.
just said something and you see it for next year, and I agree with the capital program. And the planning 5 years out. I thought that was really nice, not just nice, it was a well thought out approach. I'm having a problem bringing it to the voters. Bringing, let's say it's appendix E,
E is the 1 year, yes.
right?
Sorry, F.
F is the one.
I'm having a problem bringing that in. So is there any way that the program with all of the appendices except one, bring that to the voters and work on fine tuning the rest?
A counter question. Because what we don't have, and I'm the guy that asked this 2 years in a row saying, how does this fit in our capital plan? And what are you asking of me of it as a taxpayer for next year? Which is appendix F, right? That appendix F is budget. What's the next year? What are you asking for me to fund as a taxpayer? Without it, I feel like we're not seeing the full picture. I'm just saying that as a taxpayer.
Trying to understand your question, Claire. Can you try that again? Cause I don't know if I really understand what you're trying to ask.
Let's say, I'm trying to put it into an example. Let's say you're going to be asking library, it's going to be asking for, say, $40,000 in the 5-year plan. But instead of putting it in for the fiscal year 24, 25, 26, you put it in for 26, 27, but you present the plan to the taxpayers this year at the meeting and say, this is the plan for next year.
The
This is
5-year plan,
funding,
the
funding.
5-year plan will capture that
Right.
because it
The timing.
has the years.
Pushing the timing 1 year. From fiscal year 25, 26 to 26, 27, but you would be showing the taxpayer everything that you've done. Because that would be the time when they say, we don't like this, or that would be the time that they say, brilliant.
But they're not gonna vote on a library one until the year that it comes up. Right? They'll see it. They get
They'll see it, they know
understand
it's
what's
coming.
going on in the grand scheme. Which is good. It's what we should be giving them, full transparency. Yeah, there's some projects in the library, there's some projects in public works, there's some projects. We got some good stuff going on in the town. They won't vote on that. I mean, that wouldn't be a vote issue until the year of execution.
So there will be nothing in the, working with the budget, there will be nothing for 25, 26 that you're proposing.
No change.
For this year, because I'd say we're fat. We just-
So-
It's all fully funded.
So the
already.
budget, we can work on the budget separately from what's going on here.
Yes. Because we're not asking for any changes to the current budget process. Or line items or
Money.
So the way
Money
they set this
or
up,
an additional.
Well, but-
line.
Going back to what I said there, but, and that's why it's important that somebody represents this and can speak to that matter to the voters. Because, you know, what goes on quite a bit there, well, if it isn't broke, why fix it? You know,
Understand?
so it's important there to be able to get that info out to them. To say, well, look, now it gives you a better picture. Also down the road here. You know, now you can see. Exactly right here on this page. You know,
What we're saving for,
correct,
and that there are no changes, we're just taking it a step further and putting it on pretty spreadsheets.
correct.
And we have
No,
the
but,
hearing.
I mean, that,
It will be
it's very
changes going
useful,
forward.
I mean, you know. I mean, I like that. You know, but I'm just saying that. That question will more than likely come up. You know. So,
And we have the hearing or hearings,
They're supposed to be-
required, right? And they're built into the timeline,
mhm,
which is, they're public informational hearings, dedicated to the CIP.
well, hopefully they're better attended than the select board.
I guess
But-
that's
Sorry.
one of my, no, one of my always greatest concerns is how well we communicate wherever we are. right? And your audience is our audiences are typically very small. So and I'll say this probably for the 10,000th time, how do we? We have great plans of connecting, we click this, you can find this, we can put, but how do we tell the voters about this sort of in real time so they hear it over and over again? Are they gonna be like me and show up on the voter go to go? I don't remember exactly what this was.
Well, I'll use that as an example, the shoreline protection. You know, very well attended, both meetings. Of course, kind of a hot topic, right? But very well attended. I'm not sure if somebody looks at this and goes, oh, boy, I've got to attend this meeting, you know? Well, you see, you know, so, I mean, that's,
So
how do you do that? That's,
how do we talk to people
Yeah.
about this? Like,
Right, because they're gonna show up at town meeting day or.
Well,
informational day.
And they're gonna
Yeah.
get lost in they'll get lost in the forms.
Oh, yeah,
We all do still.
most questions come up at the 11th hour.
yeah,
And that can put a lot of people in the spot.
I think the best way at the 11th hour is to show the spreadsheet sheet that you have right there
There it
and,
is.
and explain that this is a budgeting tool for transparency. And explain it by talking through that sheet and saying, look, we're still budgeting pretty much the same way we always have.
Yeah.
Except we're forecasting
Mhm.
and we're trying to get it out to the public that we're forecasting 5 years out now. So everybody can see what's coming up. I mean, I think they can talk through that
yeah.
fairly easily and efficiently without getting into the weeds too deep.
And then the other piece of that is not just, are we budgeting, but we have the bona fide fund or funds and the policy that support that, i.e. the contingency reserve fund as an example.
I think if anything, in 5 minutes of looking at that, I'm hoping that most of the town can understand what the long-term goal is and what you guys have been trying to accomplish before I even came on board.
One of the, just anecdotally, our intent for the hearings is to blow this up to a, 3x5 or whatever, so that we could have it there and people can come up and look at it, et cetera.
How can you put it on a screen?
You
But
can,
it's
still
gonna be-
gets condensed.
We're gonna
Yeah,
print
it's
it
a
on
little
file.
hard to see. I mean, we'll have some print,
February's better.
but
Like-
if we have a big,
Like Becca Balance.
Yeah,
check
what about
to
the
us.
big
We're gonna
screen?
put on
the big screen might,
We could put, yeah.
as well, but
Literally,
certainly if we had a,
Big screen.
you go to other meetings or whatever, you have that, it'd
Mm,
be a great, tool.
I think putting it. We're going down the rabbit hole here, but putting it on the big screen would probably be better. Because you can flip from one to another and everybody can stay seated. You put it on a board, people
Yeah.
have to get up and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we jump, I want to close the subject on contingency reserve fund. Two things. One, now that Lisa has shared with us that VLCTs, the percent came out to like 16%. Our current policy says 10%. I guess a question or a decision that we would need from you, because we can update the policy and just send it to you, send it back and say, please sign this. So the policy is updated. And then, so that's one question, is what percentage do you want to put of the operating expenses as a contingency reserve fund? It's currently 10%.
When we have to have that on the agenda for a select board meeting? Or can we just say, okay, this is what we're gonna have?
Very good question.
Cause it wasn't warned. Is that what you're thinking?
So I would ask, or we ask, so we can,
And it's
we'll
not-
update the
yeah.
policy and
That
send it
goes
back.
out
to you.
tomorrow for,
You want me to add it?
why don't you add that to it,
Okay.
please?
And then the second piece is, once that percentage has been determined to, and I assume Karen would draft this, is that article that goes out, that now creates the fund saying that it will come from existing surplus, et cetera, in appropriate language. That goes out as an article this year. You got the policy, You have the fund that supports us, and it takes some of that that's out there in surplus land and puts it in the contingency reserve fund.
And you know what's left over in case there's some left over.
That's going towards other capital initiatives.
No, there can go back to the taxpayer.
It could be, yeah.
Right.
There are certain funds here that have been earmarked already,
Mm.
so. Those we're not going to touch because that'll off with their heads.
And maybe eventually you'd want to consider a surplus policy
Right,
or balanced budget, you know, whatever. They're called a couple different things, but probably wait until we make sure the voters approve a contingency reserve before you start playing around with that stuff.
right.
Yeah, I was thinking about that about 20 minutes ago.
So there's
But
two
we make
things
sure
we
we have
recommend
it
you
Year after year
bring
and
up to your
after
next
year,
board,
it
the
keeps
percentage,
going, you gotta have something
and
do.
to approve the
Or
article that will be created so that it's warned accordingly.
But I get the reserve fund,
Um,
contingency reserve.
Your
in place
point though,
before-
the funds that already.
No, it's not.
Earmarked.
Yeah, they've been earmarked.
Whatever that expression is.
When you're talking about the 10%, 16%, whatever it's going to end up being, that is from the general fund. We have the highway fund that is separate
Mhm.
and the water department that is separate.
Right.
So when you do the contingency, I think you would be leaving off the highway fund. If that's already.
That would be, that,
Are you talking about
that's the way
factoring
that
the
I'm looking
percentage?
at it. They leave the highway fund out.
And not include it in the contingency for operating the highway department?
Oh, okay. Well, okay, so it's not in that general contingency fund. The thing is
You don't
that,
wanna have two, do you?
I guess nobody, you don't want that money. Because we've already said there that it's basically earmarked for public works building. Okay? If you throw that in to this other general fund, then that can be taken from.
Correct. What if you funded the contingency reserve fund with all general fund surplus, but covers 2 months or 10 or 15, 20% of the highway operating expenses? The contingency reserve fund, the idea of that is to have a rainy day fund, that if for something happens or we have this money we can use quickly to whatever emergency comes up.
Mhm.
And the idea is to have it, you know, VLCT is saying 2 months of operating expenses. We'd have to still operate the highway department, so we could include the 20% of total general and highway operating expenses, put that in the reserve, contingency reserve fund using all general fund surplus.
So
I would almost think that we didn't want it to be all the budgets, because like if there's a big catastrophe, we're not gonna not pay the librarian.
Or the librarian, yeah. I mean, originally on the spreadsheet, I had all four: cemetery,
I don't wanna
library,
pay anybody that.
highway. in general.
Well, you know what I mean, like, we really have to be thinking, the select board has to think globally, even though there are 4 budgets.
Right, so 10% of all the operating budget.
Right,
which is the 1.4 million.
Yes, well, that was just highway, that didn't include cemetery and
That's right.
it didn't include
The
cemetery and library, so you'd have to include those two.
But these are the things that the treasurer can help the select board walk through every year, because every year different budgets are gonna have different surpluses and
It's gonna be a
deficits.
different amount.
So, you know,
Yeah.
one year we might be helping Public Works, you know, fund a deficit, and one year Public Works might be helping the general.
well, so if we, let's say 10%. But we take it from all operating budgets.
I think what you're doing is creating a fund of an amount yet to be determined that will cover the operating expenses of the entire town.
Right, so if you then take 10% from the total.
Yep.
I mean, but we take everybody's budgets in there,
Mm-hmm.
and we say, okay, this will be this contingency, this 10%,
Mm-hmm.
okay? but it's from the whole entire budget.
Mhm.
Now. We'll see what that comes up to, but then. Then that can be used,
Well, then you get to decide how to fund it, and you could do a
Well-
number of different things.
well, I mean.
It doesn't have to
more
be,
like-
and I wouldn't pin yourself down on the policy on that. You'd want.
Correct.
Yeah,
Because every year it could change.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, as the funds change and things, you know,
Well, I'm just saying there that. Maybe I'm just not very clever about this, but. So if we start off with the 10%, let's say it's 10%, it could be 15%, whatever. Of the total operating, now we have a new. Basically, it's a new line, it's a new category here with this program, okay? That leaves the previous monies that have already been earmarked out of that.
all the reserve funds would not be included in that, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
So that's what I'm saying, and then that becomes the contingency.
All you're doing is basically taking the overall operating cost of what we have to pay a year to keep the town operating.
Correct.
And you're putting 10% of what that cost is into a savings account.
Yep.
That's it.
But as a taxpayer, they may be looking at the general fund and you come down to the surplus. They look at it as the surplus. It will be from that.
But
That
once
we
you
fund
do
it.
this
Yeah,
and
that
you
you
have
fund
this
it.
set up. And you pay that 10% for the reserve fund. Any surplus after that that is not included is the money that should be going back to the taxpayers. If we
If there
have,
is any,
if we
yeah.
have that.
Yeah.
Because we still have to operate the town in the event of emergency or some sort of a collapse, or say one of the town buildings gets destroyed. We still have to have those reserves.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's, you know, it's like running your home budget and not having a savings account or any extra money that you can get access to. You're setting yourself up for failure. And really, that's the way that the taxpayers really should be looking at it is, you know, if there is an emergency, we don't have to just shut down.
Yeah.
We have that. If we
Or
get that
borrow.
and more, then that's what goes back to the taxpayers. If anything, it shows them exactly what we have to achieve for them to be able to get money back.
Yeah.
You know, and there's no ifs, ands and buts about it, because if we meet our budget and we put out all the funds to the different spots and we have left over, that's theirs. And that's really what they've been asking for, is why are we just putting money into these funds? Well,
Right.
this is a policy, this is how it's set up, and this is where we're gonna be. It's not, you know, Carl and mine's decision one day to say, hey, we're gonna put this much money in. You know, we'll have a policy on it and it's all spelled out and transparent so they can look at it.
So other towns, you found one was 15%, one was 20%.
Yeah, some more 20, some more 50.
So
some more 10.
10 might not be ample.
So we'll decide that
Mhm.
Monday night.
Yeah. Okay.
I want time to think about it too, and I wanna be able to look at inflation
I
for like the
can,
last 15 years.
Show you what those numbers will look like too,
That would be great.
based on the current budget that we have, what it would look like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
See what we're doing.
What's
What
left
it
in
would
the
be.
fund, because if you do 20% and there isn't enough in the general fund balance.
true.
Yeah, then you'd have to, if you're gonna make that kind of policy at 20%, you're gonna have to add that to next year's budget
Correct.
to
Yeah,
feed,
right.
to make it.
Can you change the policy amount?
That's.
Year- that's
yeah.
I mean,
Why I
that's,
like
the
that's the
policy.
select board,
Carbon
so
10 and
whenever, yeah.
And
Right.
next year, well, we
See how
really
it
need
goes.
more.
Or vice versa.
Right, we can always bring it down later, yeah, and we may be at 20%, and then the next year there, we see there, we had a great year there, and
Yep.
say, okay, now we're gonna reduce it down to 10.
Yep.
Or
Money back.
whatever, so. All right.
As long as as long as there is a fund balance,
Mhm.
you know.
And the other part that I see that's nice about this is once we have this established. And it's all written out and it's working, it doesn't matter if we all stay in office. Because it's easy
Exactly.
enough for somebody
Yeah.
else to pick up and continue with.
Yeah.
But still have the transparency for the town.
Well, good.
Other key point, I mentioned this, but just, so no new accounts would be created with the exception of the contingency reserve fund, if approved by the voters. No accounts will be abolished, nor will there be any additional consolidation of accounts. So we're really not seeing a whole lot of change in the budgetary side of this. What are the next steps for the CIP? So following what any other decision, and like your next select board, based on some decisions that you might make there. The capital program, which is again, that document there, which covers guidance and procedures. We have to update and get that back to you. The 5-year plan. It's a draft. We'll see again, Lisa may get some new numbers. And so as we get closer to budgetary time or, the staying with the budget cycle, it'll be as accurate as it is the day it's presented, right? And the same would hold true for the actual budget, the capital budget. We would draft the CIP update and introduction of those documents in the annual report, like. So in the annual report, last year we had just kind of a cover letter saying, hey, we're kicking this thing off, we're getting it going. We'd have to do a little more explanation this year. Tell them it's a 3-part program, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think we can maybe give them a link and say, go to the website if you want to read the program, because it's lengthy, right? And just because this is really hard to see, we could say, we'll explain the 5-year plan and why it's important. And say, but in order to give you the best visual, please click here, whatever, go to the website. The plan, the budget, that's easy to see. It's visual. It's a 1-pager. And again, a narrative that talks about that. That's something we have to do as well. Update the contingency reserve policy based on whatever decisions you make the next time you folks meet. And then update our frequently asked questions as it coincides with changes or decisions made from you folks. I want to go back and just review, okay, tracking and, okay. I guess a general question.
Can we, give the people on Zoom a chance to see if they've not been able to pipe in?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
I think Tim's left, but Tim, did you?
Oh, can you hear me now?
Uh-huh.
No, I think I'm really pleased that everybody seems to be understanding the fundamentals, and I'm really excited that this, I think, is being well received and moving forward, or appears to be moving forward. So I'm good, no questions.
Right.
I have one overarching question and open up to other questions, comments, and concerns. Based on what you've heard from us this evening with regard to the way ahead, how you would see the capital projects that come forward, either in plan or the budget, the 1 year, and the general discussion as we've had with regard to our fiscal status, because as Corinne mentioned, we have 6 point, whatever the number is, million in projects, but our collective deficit for that is like $95,000. So generally we're in pretty good shape. Do you feel comfortable with the direction that we're heading with that, so that you would see that in the budget cycle coming your way? Obviously, we need to meet our statutory requirements to get to the planning commission. And then we've got part of that is warning of the hearing and to the town folks with regard to the CIP.
With the budget process, nothing changes. So the budgeting process shouldn't be affected.
I have to turn to you, so.
Yeah, no,
Not unless you want to
not,
be. I mean, this is a
exactly,
tool,
not unless
so-
you want to fund the new fire station through taxpayer dollars and not debt. I mean, those are the kind of things that
Yeah.
that would affect the budget.
All right.
And for anybody else from the committee, is there anything that we missed, salient points that needed to be made?
The only thing I got to say is this is a lot of work. And we're often in thankless positions, and I appreciate all the work that you guys have put into this. A lot of time.
Thank you, and I would just add to that, certainly Lisa and Corinne have certainly been like invaluable resources to the committee and to me personally.
You're awesome. I feel like the town's in good hands generally. Thank you.
Sorry, I do have a quick question. On
Terry.
the contingency fund, does it have to be a hard, let's take a number, 15%? Like if we pass this memorandum, is the town obliged to continually fund at 15%, or can, so that if you end up wiping out a lot of that contingency fund, do you have to rebuild it quickly, or can you say a target of 15%, which then gives the select board a little bit of discretion in terms of how quickly they fund it, and at the same time allows the select board to point the taxpayers to the policy that says, look, we wiped out half of our contingency fund last year for this reason, and now we need to start rebuilding it. So again, the basic question, can it be a target number in the wording, or if we pass the resolution, or the select board passes the resolution, are we committed to funding it at 15% each year, or up to the 15?
Well, the policy states the contingency fund shall be funded at no more than 10%. I guess it says no more. So as long as there's funds in there up and to 10%, perhaps that could be wordsmith.
Or
That's a good question, because what if there's an emergency and we spend $100,000 on Lake Shark, Lakeview gets wiped out in a storm or something, and we spend $100,000?
Right.
How quickly, right, do we have to bring that back up?
And
Well, so if we take a look at the budgets and we say, and we just throw this out because we haven't decided on anything there, whether it be 10%, 15%, whatever. If you can get those numbers to us as far as to say, all right, look, here's your budget. If we go 10%, 15%, 20%. Of course, those payments come in there 4 times a year, right?
Mhm.
So, well, most of them. And so then we can kind of see how we're progressing. And you're right. I mean, we don't really know if a catastrophic event hits. I mean, you have a tidal wave here and wipe out the whole town, but, so I mean, that's kind of a tough one. However, if people would see there that we do have a program plan in place. Right, all right, fine, and so far we've collected X amount of dollars,
Working it back.
And
towards-
see, as it develops and grows, kind of like what Lisa and I were just talking about, eventually you may have to have a cap. You know, I mean,
Well,
2 million, 1 million, I don't
Well,
know.
it's worded that way, at no more
At
than.
no more,
10%.
that's the committee's recommendation,
Okay.
at
Yeah.
no more than.
But you're putting that in every year, right?
I mean, the policy
Not
doesn't,
10% every year.
No, it's
Mm.
10% of the
And
operating
that's it.
budget,
And then
that's
if the
the
budget
cap.
is higher the next year, you just make up the difference.
Yes,
It'll be 10%.
Right.
it's a rolling number based on the budget.
Yeah,
so it's a percentage of the budget.
yeah,
Right.
Yep.
So.
Yep. So it's gonna change, it's gonna
Yeah.
change every year.
yeah.
Mhm.
But what it might not do is go down, should the budget ever go down.
I don't see that happening.
Oh,
Is there anything else that you need from us? Does this help to, say, educate, to get a better picture of the direction and the purpose? And as we get closer to bringing this forward to townspeople with regard to, this is your 5-year plan and what's coming up in your capital projects.
Well, I think it's very helpful, Terry. I'm still trying to wrap my whole head around it here, whatever. I'd like to nosh on this versus gulping it down. I think what's important there to get around to people is saying, well, this is a plan, but that plan can be changed. you know,
Or it may have to.
or it may have to, correct, so. But I think that that's important, so they don't think that, oh my God, they're tying my hands for this thing. And I have no way out,
Right.
you know, so I think that would be very important to get that info out. And when these meetings start occurring and this and that, whatever, if we can, you know. The big thing is on the education part, you know, I mean, that's where shoreline protection there was very, I think they were very. Very good with that. That they got that info out there, or they're trying to get the info out. You know, versus being, you know, watchdogs, that they were. Like, you know, inform people, you know, so anyway, but no, I like, I really, you know, commend you all there for the time and effort there that you placed into this little project, so.
Little.
Well, little project.
2 years in.
There is,
By the way,
what, 2
there-
years on this?
We're getting closer.
One big plus on that is that it didn't cost the taxpayers any money,
No, it didn't.
so, and so that should be brought up, so, anyway.
So we are still on, then based on that, we're still on target. We're still in our CIP schedule. We'll make updates based on your next meeting.
Yep.
And
That'll be
continue
Monday.
our process.
Yeah, so the next step is Monday, it's on the agenda that you officially receive the CIP program, which is basically the budget and the plan.
Mhm.
When you say the budget.
No, that,
Right here.
The one,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
what's gonna
Okay,
be
that's
spent.
it.
yes, yeah.
Dealing
Um,
with two different.
Yeah.
yeah, so you. would
Yeah, and
have
that's
to-
hard. That's where I was confused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so you would receive that, and then, you would schedule the first public hearing. So that's the second thing on the agenda. So I would encourage you to think about, after what you've heard tonight, if you think, the current timeline is doable. So on Monday, when we have to schedule the public hearing, the current timeline is for the first public hearing to be November 4th. So
You still have to go to PC though, right?
you first have a public hearing, and then you go to the PC. And then you have a second public hearing.
So the PC can say, no, this doesn't jive with the town plan.
They can't say no, but they're supposed to give feedback.
It's just the feedback.
All right, so. I mean,
And we don't
I'm
have to
in.
make decisions. I mean, it's on the agenda. Those are the two decision points for Monday. It's
Yeah.
just a heads up now that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, I'm in on it, I mean, it's,
I'm glad you'll be there.
well, there's nothing I'd rather do on my.
Hopefully you won't get a flat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly. So, yeah, nothing I'd rather do. Voting season's over, so, all right. So any other comments from anyone? Jim, are you all set?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, thank you for attending. With that being said there, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn,
I'll make a motion that we adjourn at.
6:50.
Thank you.
Second.
And Joe, you second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, motion carries. We are officially adjourned.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good night,
Thank you.
everyone. All the best.
Night.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Turn the recording off.
Yep.
You guys.
So.
did a lot of work. Kicked out.